Alright, looks like we're on. I'm employing the complete fiction of H.P. Lovecraft as a tripod here. I've gotten into him these past few days. I wouldn't say he's a sci-fi god, but his stories are okay. Albeit a bit racist, but alright. Pretty good sci-fi. Which is what today's topic is. Sci-fi. Specifically, Star Trek. The show created by Gene Roddenberry in the 60s. What I'd like to talk about today is the horrible reboot movie that was done by J.J. Abrams. My problem with it isn't the plot per se, but it's the fact that the actors look like they're 20-something doughboys and they're all ripped, and that's not my Star Trek. I think that the trouble with Star Trek is, prior to the J.J. Abrams movie, Star Trek had a consistent universe where all the actors never changed. It was set solid, and that's what I think I liked about it. It was very consistent. Unlike the Marvel Universe, DC Universe, where they have all these crazy alternate dimensions where different stuff happened. But J.J. Abrams ruined that with his retconned time travel crazy story that Leonard Nimoy is given 5 minutes to explain. And sure, you can say he's real Spock and the other Spock is just fake Spock, but why does the fake Spock have to look nothing like Leonard Nimoy, and why does Chris Pine look nothing like William Shatner? It's insanity to hire Chris Pine to play Captain Kirk. It ruins it. Now, there's let me see. What I find really brilliant, especially a better way of connecting, of reviving Star Trek for a new generation, if you will, the next generation, was Star Trek Generations. I mean, if you compare that to how Star Trek by J.J. Abrams brings back the series, it's a whole lot better. In Star Trek Generations, they hire Captain Picard. No, the opening scene is set on the original Enterprise with the original cast. I think even James Doohan plays Scotty. Kirk walks onto the bridge. He says, "Scotty, do something," and Scotty's exactly the same person. He's like, "Hey, come on, beam me up, Captain." And it's a very interesting opening sequence with all the original cast there. Then we flash forward 40 years, or however many years the Next Generation is set apart from the original. I forget exactly the number of years, but we fast forward to Captain Picard and the new Enterprise and the new Enterprise crew. And we've got Worf and Deanna Troi, Geordi LaForge, Data, all that, Riker. And so Captain Picard is told by Whoopi Goldberg, who's the psychic bartender. She says to him, "There's this trippy dimensional cloud that makes you have these crazy hallucinations." And then Captain Picard goes down to the planet where the trippy dimensional cloud is supposed to land. And there's this bad guy there. I forget exactly what his motivation is, but he says, "I'm going to go into the dimensional cloud, you fool." And Picard says, "Nope, I am also." So then they go into the dimensional cloud, and Whoopi Goldberg's there, and she says to Captain Picard, "Well, I'll show you where old fat Kirk is." And just the reveal of Captain Picard walking down like an earthy street, and then he comes up across Captain Kirk who's chopping wood, and then he takes him in. He's like it's the most incredible crossover. All throughout the Next Generation, you never saw Captain Picard, Captain Kirk, the two legends together. I mean, I forget if the Captain Kirk in the movie is real or if he's just a trippy dimensional cloud thing, just an hallucination, but whatever. It's the meeting of the two great Star Trek captains, and they say, "Hi," and then they go off and battle the evil dimensional stuff. Now, that's a great way to connect the old stuff with the new stuff, I say. Don't replace William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy with these 20-something hot people. I don't care if my Star Trek is attractive. I care if it's good sci-fi. That's what I care about. And what Generations, I think, does really well as a movie is it accepts that William Shatner is old and fat. But it says, you get to play old fat Kirk. You know, you won't be shirtless anymore. You won't be battling the lizard monster, but you can be old fat Kirk. And that's what Star Trek Generations gets right. All right. But the Star Trek movie gets this wrong. It takes two of the most well-known characters of all time, played by the best actors. I mean, I just can't imagine Kirk not being played by William Shatner, or Spock not being played by Leonard Nimoy. And even if Kirk and Spock are sexy, I don't know who would find them that way. They're not meant to be sexy. I mean, sure, Kirk is, but Spock isn't. In the new Star Trek movie by J.J. Abrams, they have this... Dr. McCoy is the same. Dr. McCoy, I know, absolutely isn't supposed to be a sex symbol. He's a crotchety old guy with a grumpy voice, and that's why DeForest Kelley is the top notch when it comes to Dr. McCoy. You can't get him wrong. The thing about the new Star Trek movie is it fails to understand that it's a bad reboot, and it just doesn't care about its source material or how close it gets, because you can have epic space battles with your stupid CGI. What I say is, that's horrible. Now, take something. Not only is the Star Trek movie unnecessary, there doesn't even need to be a Star Trek movie, because the best Star Trek movie is Star Trek Part 1, the motion picture. That's one of the best sci-fi TV adaptations of all time. You look at that, and there's nothing wrong with it. Now, some people would say that Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, is better. But I have to disagree, because Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, is, you know, the character of Khan is a bad character. And in Star Wars time, there's this giant genetic uprising of these scary Asian pirate people around, I don't know, 1990 or something. And that's how Khan came to be, and they find him in this sealed off chamber. But my problem with Khan, mostly, is that he didn't exist in the 90s in real life, so I don't know how I'm supposed to care about him. See, I don't see Star Trek as set in some alternate universe where crazy genetic wars happened in the 90s. I see it as a legitimate vision of our future and the future of space travel. And my measure of a good science fiction writer, like Gene Roddenberry, is that they should set their stories as far into the future as they can. That way, by the time that time actually rolls around, the media will have been destroyed, or no one will care anymore, so that the sci-fi writer won't be made fun of for all the things he got wrong. But I also think that a sci-fi writer should strive to make things accurate. Think about all the incredible themes Star Trek brings up. It brings up the takeover of AI, it brings up the freaking time travel a dozen times. It's just an incredible conceptual speculative fiction show. And everything in it could potentially happen in the future. That's what I like about it. So to have this Khan genetic magic man just come out of nowhere and alter the fabric of, reality is pretty weird. Because Star Trek is set in, the 22nd, 23rd century, way off. So what's really great about it is they don't have to look at the present. Because Gene Roddenberry, I assume, is probably a bad predictor of the near future. And that's especially true with the episode Space Seed, where they find Khan, the magic strong guy, and they just thaw him out, and then he is evil. And then in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, it's the same thing. They find him, and he's evil. It's boring. What kind of villain is that? He's just an evil genetic monster. And there weren't genetic wars in the 1990s. Gene Roddenberry went too far there. He doesn't understand that to be a good sci-fi writer, you have to create compelling visions of the future, which is what Star Trek does really well, and that's why I like it, because it's a very interesting, in-depth look at the lives of space travelers in the future. And just to have this stupid, strong guy, that's his only gimmick. He's strong. What about the other villains of Star Trek? There's Baylock. I could take a movie with Baylock. Baylock's an incredible character. I mean, sure, he turns out not to be bad at the end of the Corbomite maneuver, but he's still fine. He's still a fun character that you could really play around with in a full-length Star Trek movie. I mean, they could have a kind of remake of Spectre of the Gun with Europe Brothers. It could be, I don't know. There's the freaking bulb heads from the pilot episode, The Cage. Those aliens look so cool. And to see them in a Star Trek movie would be real neat. But then again, you could take Harcourt Fenton Mudd, the only character besides the crew of the Starship Enterprise to appear in two unrelated episodes. I mean, sure, maybe he's not as evil as Khan, but he's more interesting. He's fat and boisterous, and he annoys Kirk. Or there could just be a Star Trek movie about Tribbles. Tribbles are more fun than the stupid than Khan. Or what about just, rock people or something? There's the one with the rock people, So what I've got to ask is, why Khan? Why make a movie about Khan, of all people? When the 70s rolled around, I think everyone was aware that those genetic wars that Gene Roddenberry had predicted weren't going to happen, because that's crazy. But they went ahead with the sequel anyway. I think Khan was a bad idea, and he should have died with the original episode, Space Seed, which is really bad. Khan is the least interesting part of Star Trek. I get that he's supposed to be Kirk's worst fear or whatever, just this crazy space battle, but I don't care. He's a bad character. He's historically inaccurate, and that's what bothers me about Star Trek, because as far as Star Trek goes, I look at it as a very realistic view of the future, so to have things like genetic wars in the 1990s is crazy for me. Not only do I hate Star Trek II because it has Khan in it, and his stupid brain-infesting caterpillars, it also has, Spock die at the end. I mean, that's a very drastic decision, and it's like, you could have saved it for Star Trek 3. It's only the second movie, and he dies at the end. And for 2 years, everyone thought Spock was dead, but then in Star Trek 3, they just bring him back. What a lazy plot device. It's like, if you're gonna make the extreme decision to kill this beloved character, then why bring him back? Like, there's no reason to do that. Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, is also really bad. They just go to Chicago in the 1980s. Unlike the series episodes where they do time travel back to Earth, like Assignment Earth, where they have to stop Mr. Seven and his crazy cat lady, and then they realize, oh, Mr. Seven's doing the right thing. He's trying to prevent the world from being blown up, and then they leave him alone. Or take like Tomorrow is Yesterday, where they see the Enterprise and they think it's a UFO. What about The City on the Edge of Forever, written by Harlan Ellison? I mean, that one's great. I mean, think about how much more complex that is than The Voyage Home. The Voyage Home is bad. Think about The City on the Edge of Forever. Dr. McCoy goes crazy. They chase him down to the planet, but too late. He's escaped through the talking Gate of Rock, and the Gate of Rock says, if you go through me, you can time travel. And they say, okay, so they go back to the Depression. Kirk and Spock have to steal clothes to look like they're from that period, and then Kirk falls in love with this lady, but then Spock says, nope, she has to die, because if she lives, then Hitler will win World War II. And Kirk's like, oh, gosh dang it, I happened to fall in love with the one lady who was crazy important in World War II. That's one of the first time travel stories to look at the butterfly effect in a serious way. Star Trek 4 doesn't do that. It's boring. And then we go on to Star Trek 5, Star Trek 6, Star Trek 7. The franchise is dead by that point, and that's why it just gradually petered out until no one cared anymore. But Star Trek 1 was an incredible movie. It's the only good Star Trek movie with the original cast. Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, is where things start going downhill very fast. But Star Trek 1 is fine. What I think is really ingenious is 10 years passed between the end of the series and the movie. Okay, not 10 years, 9, 5, whatever. I'm not good at that. But just think, for a long time, there's no Star Trek, and everyone wonders, when is Star Trek coming back? We want more Star Trek. And then, on a big screen, you can see the exploits and space adventures of the crew of the Starship Enterprise. And what's really novel is, they're all the same. It's the same cast, down to the letter. J.J. Abrams wouldn't do that. Think about the great thing about Star Trek the movie. Star Trek the Motion Picture, Part 1. You've got William Shatner as Kirk, Leonard Nimoy as Spock, DeForest Kelley as Dr. McCoy. He starts out with a beard, but then he shaves it off. You've got frickin' Michelle Nichols as Uhura, Walter Koenig as Chekhov, George Takei as Sulu, and James Doohan as Scotty. And I think that's just how Star Trek ought to be. Think about the incredible changes that Star Trek made to the genre. In the series, the Enterprise is very colorful. It looks like a bunch of beeping colors and flashy lights, and I think it doesn't really try to say what any of those do, what any of those are for. I mean, I like the original series Enterprise design out of all of them. But in Star Trek the movie, they upgrade the Enterprise to look more like a place where people could really travel through space, sleep, eat. Lots more scientific jargon for the nerds among us, and for the frickin' action sci-fi cool lovers, we got the wormhole scene where they go all trippy because they're in a wormhole, and you got the Klingons. In the original series, the Klingons just look like Asians. They just kind of have brown skin, like in The Trouble with Tribbles and Friday's Child. But in the movie, that's when they develop those nice forehead ridges that we see later in Worf in Star Trek The Next Generation. Star Trek The Next Generation realizes that the cast of the original series had aged by that point, so they thought, we'll create a new show with new characters. And that they did. And that's why I think Star Trek The Next Generation is the other best. It's the other best. It's the only other good series. After that, they go downhill very quick. But Star Trek The Next Generation is good. Captain Picard is equally as fine a captain. Riker, Deanna Troi, Dr. Crusher, what's his name? Geordi LaForge, Data, Worf. And, of course, it has the holodeck, which in one episode of the animated series is referred to as a rec room. Oh, I forgot Harcourt Fenton Mudd is also in one episode of the animated series. That makes 3. But anyway, my point being, Star Trek The Next Generation understood that the cast of the original series was old, but it tried hard to create a nice, consistent universe where everything was tied up. One episode has Spock, and it's still Leonard Nimoy, so it's great. That's all they need to do really, is just keep the characters the same, so it's very realistic. Then you've got the reboot. The reboot is so bad. It's so horrible. The thing about the original series is it was constrained by the practical effects of the time, which weren't very good. By the time the animated series rolls around and they all look like Scooby-Doo, they go crazy because, with animation you can do pretty much anything your imagination wants. So it's like they just wandered into a cooler part of the universe all of a sudden, which is kind of inconsistent, but, they go full-on nuts with, I don't know, just all kinds of crazy special effects and stuff. Not to say that the original Star Trek series doesn't have some fine special effects. I think they're great special effects. Down to the phasers, the Enterprise floating around in space. I mean, that's some stuff for that time, Star Wars, the motion picture. not the J.J. Abrams one, is good mostly because it's just a fun space adventure. It doesn't try to be pretentious or too heavy-handed with giant evil Asian men, strong and bad like Khan. It just says, here's a fun space adventure about this lady. She goes bald. She's possessed by an alien. Then they find this ship that's called Voyager, and it turns out, it was launched in the 70s, and here Kirk and Spock are discovering it like 200 years later. That's pretty epic. And then she's like, I must find V'ger, and then just this crazy phantasmagoria of like sci-fi genius. And then when they go into the cloud, that's the fun part. They go into the cloud and it's like all murky, and just to see the Enterprise drift along in that nebulous cloud, the endless maze of the colors, it's like, that's amazing. As for special effects, I think Star Trek the motion picture excels, but sadly the franchise failed because there was 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick, which, don't get me wrong, it's good. It also has neat special effects, but I think Star Trek 1, the motion picture, is easily as good with cool special effects and Klingon dialogue, and I think that it's pretty good. But I think 2001: The Space Odyssey was more popular because it's all spaced out, and Stanley Kubrick is an art director, and I don't care. I just care about fun sci-fi, which is what Star Trek 1 is all about. And then we've got something called Star Wars, which kind of took the spotlight away from Star Trek, which I think is sad because Star Trek 1, the motion picture, was a promising thing to a franchise, but then I assume Star Wars came out and they were like, oh, we've got to up the ante now, so they go with Khan, and then epic space battle between Khan and Kirk, and it just goes into hell very quick. I don't think Star Wars and Star Trek should be compared. They're nothing alike besides the fact that they're sci-fi. Star Trek is a vision of humans from Earth in the future. Star Wars is a vision of humans that have never been to Earth and live in a galaxy a long, long time ago, far, far away. And then you've got Battlestar Galactica, which is just the most shameless Star Wars ripoff I've ever seen. It's also equally bad, but it's one of the first TV shows that had a soap opera type format, so you just kept wondering, when are they going to get to Earth? When are they going to get to Earth? And then it didn't matter even. Battlestar Galactica is horrible. So I'm glad it didn't succeed. It's just a ripoff of Star Wars, but with a kind of they're trying to get to Earth type twist. Battlestar Galactica's horrible. But Star Wars is good. I don't hate Star Wars for taking the spotlight away from Star Trek and ruining what could have been one of the best series of all time. I think it's kind of stupid, but Star Trek 1, the motion picture, is a lot better than J.J. Abrams' trashy knockoff about two 20-something-year-olds in a kind of stupid thing. And what I think is, the thing is, I don't think anyone can ever really capture the appeal of Star Trek again. But I think especially don't have anyone but William Shatner play Kirk, because he's Kirk, so just don't do that, because that won't work out, right? So that's why Star Trek 1, the movie, is great, and Star Trek the movie by J.J. Abrams is bad. And while the pinball, is kind of fun, I still don't like the movie. I think the pinball's the best out of all the Star Wars pinballs. The 1990s version is basically just Scotty the game, and there's the hole you shoot, and the ball just goes right between the flippers. While the new Star Trek pinball is pretty good, I think the movie is absolute garbage, and doesn't deserve to be known as a successor to the Star Wars name. I'm Nicholas Queda. This has been a review on the fine nuances of Star Wars. See you next time, science fiction fans and film criticism fans. Thanks for watch.